Good morning from CNN London. I'm Nina Dos Santos and welcome to World Business Today. We'll get to the top business news in a moment's time, but first we want to bring you up to date on a developing story that we're following in the world news side of things here on CNN this hour. There's been an attack outside the Iranian embassy in Beirut in Lebanon. Lebanese security forces say that 15 people were killed, another 50 are reported to be wounded. The state news agency says that there were 2 explosions set off by 2 separate suicide bombers. One was said to be travelling on foot, the other in a vehicle. The motive so far isn't clear. Witnesses say that the blast set off fires and destroyed several cars on the scene. CNN's Nick Payton-Walsh is in the Lebanese capital and reports that there's lots of speculation in Beirut right now as to just who could be responsible for this kind of attack and whether it might be connected to the Syrian civil war.
This blast is clearly very close to the Iranian embassy in the southern area of Beirut, where a lot of the pro-Assad groups operating inside Lebanon have supporters too. That's where Hezbollah are predominantly based, and of course Iran, one of the key backers of Damascus in that bitter, now years-long civil war. So the issue here is, does this have any connection to the conflict raging across the border? There have been promises, threats by the Sunni-backed rebels fighting Assad. They would take the fight inside Lebanon. Now, we don't know if this is connected to anything at this point, but given the nature and the proximity of where the blast was near the Iranian embassy, people will, of course, begin to draw conclusions that it's somehow connected to that fight. Does this feed in to threats from rebels inside Syria to bring the fight here? Is this a manifestation of that? Well, we'll have to look at that in the hours ahead. But clearly, from the pictures you're seeing, remarkable devastation here in Beirut, and yet again, that fear inside Lebanon, a country reeling from officially over 800,000 refugees from Syria, certainly perhaps by some accounts an awful lot more. The fear being that the war itself may eventually spread more visibly inside Lebanon itself.
That's CNN's Nick Payton-Walsh there on the scene in Beirut. And so far, as we were saying before, the casualty toll does stand at 15 dead, 50 injured so far after reports of 2 suicide bombers setting off explosions in Beirut, the Lebanese capital. Of course, we'll keep you up to date with this story as it unfolds. But in the meantime, let's get back to our top business stories of the day. Nokia shareholders are set to vote on the management decisions to completely transform their company by getting rid of its main business, which is, of course, the task of making mobile phones. Nokia is the world's 2nd biggest maker of handsets, but it's fallen way off the pace in smartphones of late. In September, executives of the firm agreed to sell the handset business to Microsoft for a price tag of more than $7 billion. Well, some shareholders are likely to oppose the deal today, but the majority are expected to back it. Approval from competition regulators will also be needed for this deal to go through. And if that happens, well, it'll put Microsoft head-to-head with the likes of Apple and Google and what has become already a very competitive smartphone market. Well, Issa Suarez joins me now live in our London studio to take a look at what's next for Nokia after this deal. Issa, Nokia was almost written off by many people before this. Could this really be their saving grace?
It could, indeed. The fact they're going to get a cash load of money could be that. I think many of the shareholders, I think, will approve it. So you mentioned there, it was falling from grace, wasn't doing particularly well. Many seeing the business as a bit of a cancer, so to speak. So people really hoping that this new look Nokia will help to invigorate, bring a new chapter to the company. Now, we don't know as of yet what that strategy will be, but we are hearing as well, I've been speaking to analysts yesterday, Nina, and they were saying that the Nokia Solutions and Networks arm of the business, so the core of the business, will be the one they'll be focusing on, and that makes about 90% of its sales. Now, interestingly enough, despite the fact when this deal was done, if you remember, Nina, in early September, there was a lot of talk, oh my God, what is Nokia doing? Because that's such a crucial part of the business, the mobile phones. Yeah. But, if I want to show you a graph to see how well they've done out of this. The share price, which we thought is going to tumble on the news, is actually done particularly well. And there you go. That's the graphic we're seeing right there of the share price when the deal was done to basically this morning. And it looks really impressive. But if I tell you that is up 102.7% since the deal was made, really put into perspective the expectations of what Nokia can get out of this. And this is really it. It's not so much the question, they're going to have a cash load of money, but what are they going to do with that money? Now, the strategy, should hear from them really at the beginning of in the first quarter of next year when this deal with Nokia is approved. But the Nokia Solutions and Networks, I'm just going to call it NSN because it's just a bit of a mouthful. That's what they'll be focusing on. Now, already they've got huge deals in the pipelines, and this is This is really important. One of them is, and this brings in the US factor, which is they're trying to tap. One of them is with Sprint in the US. They've just signed that. Well,
this is the big thing. So we know Nokia because of handsets that it makes. For instance, okay, this I have here is a BlackBerry, but it's a handset. But really, it's all about the ecology, really, of what they're using in terms of sort of software infrastructure, and that pits them against people like Apple, like Google's Android operating system, like Samsung, and that's really where they need the Microsoft tie-up, isn't it?
It is indeed, but there's also, you know, alongside this NSN I was talking about, they're hoping that with this new, you know, the flush of cash they're getting from Microsoft, it will give them a bit more ammunition to perhaps, there's talk already, Nina, of tapping into maybe a little merger, buying out Alcatel-Lucent, maybe, you know, gaining a bit of a force and to compete with the likes of Ericsson. And they do have the technical know-how. They know exactly what to do in that area. So in the meantime, they're focused on NSN, but in the long term, with the research they have, the portfolio they have on that section, on that part of the business that you're talking about, in the next couple of years, they may indeed have the know-how to compete on the mobile phone sector.
Now, we're going to be focusing in a second time on what Microsoft is getting out of the deal and how that's going to change its corporate strategy going forward. But out of the analysts that you've been speaking to, what are they saying a new look Nokia could potentially look like? Because we remember it with pretty basic handsets, very reliable, but not very high tech. Microsoft has been cutting edge technology that's revolutionized the way we use computers. What's it going to do for Nokia?
It's looking, from the analysts I was speaking to, Nina, it looks like we're going back a bit. We have to take a few steps, Nokia will have to take a few steps back before they can actually take a huge leap forward in the technology state. For the moment, it's wireless broadband. They're making, you know, they've got deals with China, Sprint in the US, but also tapping into Korea, South Korea, and also into Japan infrastructure. So that will bring in the big bucks for them. But in the long term, they are hoping to really tap in to the technology side, and I think that's really interesting. What one of them was saying to me is that there is no way that Nokia, as it is now, can compete with the likes of Google. It just doesn't have the power to do that. They've given that up, so forget it. So the new look Nokia is a bit of an old-fashioned, modest Nokia, but with a spring in its step in many ways.
All right, so 2 steps back to take 1 step forward. 'Twas ever so.
Oh, the share price is doing well, so let's hope
the share price is doing well. Thanks so much for that, Isa Suarez here in our London studio with what that means for Nokia. But of course, there are 2 sides to this deal. And indeed, if the transaction does go through, what will it actually mean for Microsoft? Can it win over a bigger share of the smartphone market? Maggie Lake takes a look at the tough competition that it faces in store.
You want to go?
I see.
It's getting nasty out there in the smartphone war. As Apple's and Android's battle it out for global supremacy, new ads by Nokia and Microsoft say there's room for a 3rd contender.
You think if they knew about the Nokia Lumia, they'd stop fighting all the time?
Microsoft is betting big that Nokia phones loaded with Windows 8 software will one day be a knockout. And as it moves to complete its $7.2 billion purchase of Nokia's handset and services units, it believes momentum is on its side.
Windows Phone has grown over 78% in the last year and is now clearly the #3 offering in the marketplace. And sales of Nokia Windows phones have gone from literally 0 2 years ago to 7.4 million units.
Microsoft still has lots of ground to cover. More than 80% of global smartphones now run on Google's Android software. Apple has an almost 13% market share. But phones like the Lumia that run Windows 8 have an only 3.6% slice of the market. Some analysts believe the Nokia purchase is too little too late and a Hail Mary pass by Microsoft. Others say it could finally add muscle to the software giant's mobile strategy. On the low end, Nokia is seeing increased sales of cheaper handsets that appeal to emerging markets. Nokia now has a best-in-show camera built into its flagship 1020 phone. And Windows 8 has a growing portfolio of apps that will help that camera show its stuff.
For the longest time, Instagram and Path and Vine, these popular social apps, weren't on the platform. Finally, they're coming to Windows Phone, which is another indicator that they're getting traction. There's going to be an extra boost of momentum because you had this 41 megapixel camera, but you didn't have the most popular photo sharing app.
As it makes its biggest move yet into hardware, Microsoft is in a scrappy mood, poking fun at Apple's Siri.
You have a real keyboard too? This isn't going to end well for me.
Former Nokia CEO Stephen Elop, who is set to join Microsoft overseeing hardware, is also feeling feisty.
I have an iPhone.
Oh, how embarrassing.
He tossed away an iPhone during a recent interview.
It's gone.
Throwing punches at the big boys may sound delusional, but Microsoft and Nokia believe this is one partnership that has a fighting chance. Maggie Lake, CNN, New York.
Now let's have a look at how European stock markets are doing in this early part of the session, sort of heading towards the midpoint of the week. And as you can see, investors still not entirely optimistic about the prospects for this region going forward. Investors will be watching out for a new survey of economic sentiment that will be coming out of Germany, as measured by the ZEW Research Institute. Those figures coming out in around about an hour's time. EasyJet shares in the UK are up around about 6%. That hasn't budged the FTSE 100, though. This comes after the budget airline said that its annual profit jumped 56%. It also said that it expects revenue per seat to keep on growing in the months ahead. That's a plus point, but of course, as I was saying before, it hasn't really moved the markets where we are. And remember that these markets are coming off of the fact that the Dow hit another record high of 16,000 in yesterday's session. Well, over in the Asia-Pacific region, markets ended the session mostly in the red as well. Not as much movement today following Wall Street's weak close on Monday. Optimism over Beijing's plan to try and reform social and economic policies continued to boost shares in Hong Kong. But Tokyo was trading lower on the back of a strengthening yen. Remember that, of course, drives down export stocks because, of course, it affects the amount of money that they bring when they repatriate sales that they've made abroad. Sydney, we saw that market falling for a second straight day. As you can see, the ASX 200 down around about 0.6%, leading the declines there. As I was saying, stock market stateside hitting another record, but falling back towards the end of the trading day. Now, coming up next on World Business Today, world leaders are gathered in Warsaw to talk about the extreme weather that's costing the global economy nearly $200 billion each year. We'll have the full details and plenty more after the break.
New perspectives, new ideas, new voices. QF Radio. Find your frequency.
CNN Marketplace Africa FaceTime. In association with MTN.
When I started being there 8 years ago and I looked at the supermarket shelves, there was pretty much only blended coffee, so mocha javas and Italian blends and this sort of thing. And I just decided that we wanted our consumers to get to know a country through its coffee. Ethiopia has wonderful florals, and Kenyans have wonderful berries. And as we have operated over the last few years, we've seen how consumers come in and come to the jars and get excited about their particular coffee, and that's been exciting.
And what made you decide to want to apply that model and even get into the coffee business in South Africa?
I love the idea that you could have a business and something you loved, which for me has always been coffee, and that you can make a difference in the lives of the producers at the same time.
Hello, welcome back. Governments from around the world are gathering in Poland for the UN's annual climate change summit. The Warsaw talks on fighting global warming have taken on a new sense of urgency in the wake of extreme weather events that have left a trail of devastation of late. Just this week, the central United States suffered a powerful string of tornadoes and storms, including dozens of flash floods, tornadoes, as well as hail that really struck cities, including Chicago. One neighborhood was flattened, and the governor of the state of Illinois declared several counties disaster areas. And of course, over in the Philippines, some are now pointing to climate change as a possible factor in Typhoon Haiyan, which left thousands dead there. And it's getting even more expensive to cope with the fallout of these kind of extreme weather events. According to a recent World Bank report, the global economy is losing, an average of $200 billion each and every single year, thanks to weather-related losses and damages here. Well, that's up to $50 billion in terms of the annual price tag in the 1950s. That's what it compares with. And the report says that it's only due to get worse in the coming years. So that is a whopping, enormous figure that a lot of people have to take into account. Remember that the insurance industry is just one industry that is extremely affected by this. Well, those mounting costs are a big part of the summit talks this week. It's shaping up to be a fight between developing and developed world economies as to who will end up footing the bill here. Paula Newton is there in Warsaw, and she joins us now with more. Paula.
Nina, stark realities there. Wealthy countries saying, look, we just can't afford that. This is the concept of what they call climate finance. And a few years ago, billions were pledged from wealthy countries to poorer countries to help them cope and really align their economies so that they have clean energy and to help them cope with the effects of climate change. The problem has been that that money wasn't forthcoming in the last few years, at least not all of it. And Nina, what's more alarming, when you look at the pledges for money going forward, it just isn't there. And you know, we had the most direct evidence of this when we had U.S. officials say in the last month, look, it's just not going to materialize. Developed countries are not doing well financially. They have structural problems in their own economies, and they cannot foot the bill for climate finance to help out those poorer nations. And the problem is, Nina, as we've seen in the Philippines, if you look at that country and what it does to contribute to climate change, it hardly contributes anything. And yet it will be one of the top 5 nations affected by climate change in the coming years. Nina?
Just going back into this issue of who should be shouldering the costs, you know, you hear governments from around the world, including the envoy to this climate change summit from the Philippines, saying, please help us out, because often it's the poor countries that get hit the hardest by climate change that's caused in the developed world, as you were just saying before.
Absolutely, and I think that that's the reason that the Philippine delegation, obviously given the burden that they're shouldering right now, so evident to everyone, are saying, look, more can be done. The problem is, Nina, when you look at the talks, and we've talked to some people who are in those hallways trying to get something done behind the scenes, while they're not supposed to come up with a huge agreement at this meeting, it still seems as if everyone is tracking back, and that is from very strident comments from developed nations. And you know, Nina, we're here in Poland. I mean, this is a place that still burns some of the dirtiest fossil fuels in order to get this energy. And I can tell you that their stand is, look, things like coal are here to stay. We are not going to sacrifice growth in our economy in order to really change to renewables or something cleaner in the very near future. Let's take a look, and I'll show you exactly how dependent a place like Poland is on coal. Travel to the depths of Poland, literally. More than a kilometer beneath the Earth's surface, and you'll find it, Poland's environmental future. Coal. For decades, it's been the lifeblood of the Polish economy and the main culprit in poor air quality, making this country's air the second dirtiest in Europe, just after Bulgaria.
Poland produces over 90% of its electricity from coal. Poland is coal addicted, and Poland won't move away from coal from one day to another.
The reason, money and jobs. The mining industry still employs more than 110,000 people here. Phasing out even some of its use would not come without short-term pain. And it is here in Poland where the wider challenge of combating climate change is so stark. As governments gather for the UN's climate change summit here in Warsaw, the Polish point from both government and industry can't be missed. There is little chance of meeting climate change goals without abandoning much of the coal industry and the jobs that go with it.
The logic is this. We want to fight to save the environment. We want to ensure that the damage we do to the environment is as minimal as possible. But we shouldn't put in place conditions whereby we don't want coal.
Poland would have to act today in an unprecedented way if renewable energy like solar and wind were to power this economy by 2030 and help it kick the coal habit. The truth is, Poland's investment in renewable energy thus far has been incredibly modest, and many worry that Poland's future still remains in dirty coal.
Poland is going completely the other way. Poland is planning to increase its emissions after 2020. So the Polish energy strategy is not really coherent with the EU's view.
The debate rages not just here, but around the world. Poland, now a pivotal member of an EU, struggling to wean itself of coal, but worried the economic sacrifice might be too big to bear. And just to show you exactly that there hasn't been much progress made on this issue, right now there is a World Coal Industry Summit going on alongside the climate talks. Certainly it's been very controversial here. Nina?
All right, Paula Newton there live in Warsaw. Thanks so much for that on the latest with that UN Climate Change Summit that is taking place there in the Polish capital. Well, let's have a look at what the corporate world is doing about all this. Zurich Insurance, for instance, is just one company saying that it's going to be investing up to $1 billion in so-called green bonds issued by the World Bank and other institutions. These kind of bonds represent a loan from the company, which the World Bank uses to try and spend on projects on a green theme. And to be clear, the idea is not for the insurer to sacrifice any profit here. The so-called green bonds are just a tiny share of the Swiss company's full portfolio. They represent around about 0.5% of the insurer's total worth. Nevertheless, companies like to trumpet their greenness when they make this kind of investment, don't they? And analysts at JP Chase have actually been crunching the numbers on this. They say that this kind of trend is on the rise. They actually reckon that investors could put aside $9 billion towards socially conscious investments this year, and that there is a growing appetite and demand for climate-conscious investments out there, not just for insurers, but of course Zurich is a case in point, because a number of these insurers are affected by severe weather events when they do occur. Now, coming up next on World Business Today, a lavish welcome for the newest ambassador to Japan. Find out who's in the horse-drawn carriage that we're showing you now after the break.
In the business of bringing joy, Kirloskar goes much beyond enriching lives.
100 years ago, all the peoples of this land came together to build a bigger and more prosperous nation. Today, our Nigeria is a giant of Africa. We are the 5th biggest oil producer in the world. We have got the biggest population in Africa. We have everything it takes to become one of the truly great nations on earth. And now we are attracting more international investment than ever before. Our strength as a nation is when we all work together as one. And when we all move together as one.
My mission is to consolidate the unity of our nation.
And so is ours.
Glow proudly announces Nigeria Centenary. One Nigeria. Great promise.
Welcome to One World. A world where you can fly in a sky without borders. Choose from over 880 destinations. Navigate a sea of bright lights. And experience seamless travel like never before. A world where you can explore new opportunities on distant shores and find comfort in over 550 lounges. Fly with 13 elite airlines and receive greater rewards for every mile. Join the pioneers of the skies. Welcome to a bigger world. Welcome to One World. Qatar Airways, a proud member of the One World Alliance.
The new US ambassador to Japan got a grand and unusually enthusiastic welcome today. That's got quite a lot to do with her famous name. She's none other than Caroline Kennedy, the only surviving daughter of the late President John F. Kennedy. It's not the horse-drawn carriage ride to the Imperial Palace that was particularly unusual. Instead, that's normally an honour that Japanese officials offer to new envoys over there. But it's actually rare for the people of Tokyo to turn out onto the streets to greet the new ambassador as they did for Kennedy. She met briefly with the Emperor Akihito to present her diplomatic credentials and then got on with the job. Well, Kennedy is Washington's first female envoy to Japan. She'll be responsible for developing the relationship between the world's third biggest economies and, of course, the biggest economy, which is the United States. Kyung La joins us now live from Tokyo on what this historic appointment actually means. Kyung, you were there. What did you make of it?
It was really quite extraordinary to be there because this is the type of public showing you might expect for a K-pop star or the royal family itself, but not an American who's taking a job that in the past has been viewed as diplomatically dull and predictable. In this case, thousands of people lined the streets. It was about 2 or 3 blocks that she took this ride, horse-drawn, and people were taking pictures. They were remembering. They were waving. It was quite extraordinary. By some estimates, it was close to 10,000 people who jammed this 2 to 3 block area just so they could get a glimpse of this woman. She is a child of Camelot, America's Camelot, at the time of JFK's presidency. But here in Japan, it's a shared experience because 50 years ago, when the president was assassinated, that was also felt here because the first live satellite imagery, those pictures that came out of the United States, those were the first broadcast images here into Japan. So an intimate approval, an intimate journey for this woman, but also for the Japanese people. Nima?
Yeah, the timing and coincidence of those two events 50 years after, of course, the assassination of JFK is just remarkable as well, isn't it, Kyung? What is she hoping to achieve here in her role?
She's been very vague about that. In all of her public comments, she says she hopes to learn, she hopes to strengthen the bilateral ties, to work on human rights. These are general themes that we've heard before from other people who've had her job. There are some significant challenges she has, and that's really where there are questions about really her diplomatic cred. She has to deal with a growing concern about China and its military might, a dispute of islands that Japan and China has been sparring over. There are concerns about trying to move a U.S. military base in the island of Okinawa. There are some significant issues and touchy issues that her predecessors have really been unable to chip away at. So some serious issues for her to deal with. It's not going to be easy, but she does say she's going to take it slow and learn.
All right, Kyung La there live in Tokyo. Thanks so much for that on Caroline Kennedy becoming the new US ambassador to Japan. Well, just ahead here on the show, after another day when Wall Street touched new record highs, we ask, how long can this rally really run?
It's a new dawn in Africa, and our enormous potential and opportunities are being harnessed by one bank. UBA, United Bank for Africa, stands strong as the bank of choice for Africans and Africa-related businesses, uniting African people and businesses with the world. So, make the wise choice today. Bank with UBA, Africa's global bank.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the land of FC Barcelona, where the weather is beautiful and so is the game. weather was brought to you by Qatar Airways, proud partner of FC Barcelona.
Every country has an identity, a history, customs, culture. A unique landscape that determines how its people live, work, and play. Now get an insider's look at some of the world's most incredible places with CNN's On the Road. This week,
From an underground treasure to a culinary master, join me as we explore Poland.
On the Road, Poland, all this week on CNN.
The table is set for you to get a different view of China.
Join me for a look at China's maturing fashion industry from the insiders who know where it's moving next.
We're in Shanghai for the next On China. They are driven designers.
They want to be famous tomorrow. They want to be that brand that you're talking about.
But can they break out onto the world stage?
I think the focus has to be on how to be good designers instead of good Chinese designers.
On China, Wednesday, only on CNN.
I'm Becky Anderson in London, and this is CNN.
From CNN London, I'm Nina Dos Santos, and a warm welcome back to World Business Today. Let's get to our top world news story this hour, getting more information about that powerful explosion outside the Iranian embassy in southern Beirut. Lebanon's official NNA news agency is now reporting that 2 suicide bombers struck. One was on foot and one was travelling in a vehicle. Lebanon's health minister is reporting that at least 23 people have been killed and now more than 146 are injured. We'll update you with more details as soon as they come in this hour. Let's have a look at what's going on in the trading session here in Europe. We're 90 minutes into the market's day so far, and as you can see, it is literally a sea of red, despite the fact that US markets actually struck another record high during Monday's session before falling back. Investors are waiting for the latest German investor sentiment measure, as read by the ZEW survey. That'll be coming out in around about half an hour from now, but in light of that, as you can see, even the etc. DAX is down by around about 1/3 of 1% in today's session. And upbeat corporate earnings from the likes of EasyJet haven't managed to budge the FTSE 100 any higher either. Well, Asian markets ended the session mixed. Hong Kong shares ended with gains losing some of their gains, I might say, as you can see, more or less on the flat line, following Beijing's announcement of reforms designed to try and stimulate growth. Shares in Tokyo and Sydney also moving lower. As you can see, it was the Sydney markets that actually fell the most, down by around about 2/3 of 1%. And as we were saying before, in the United States, the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 both hit record highs during Monday's trading session. They both broke through key psychological barriers here. We're talking about 16,000 for the Dow and 1,800 for the broader S&P 500. But it seems though neither of these two markets could hang on to that record territory for long. And as Christine Romans now reports, there are worries that this kind of rally could be running out of steam.
Wall Street surged last week as Fed nominee Janet Yellen reassured investors that she's not pulling back on the central bank's massive stimulus program anytime soon. But there are concerns this Dow hot streak is about to end.
At some point, you need to get off this wave, because this wave cannot last forever. Now, no one can tell you whether it's within the next few months or within the next few years. But at these levels of valuation, we think it's about time to take some money off the table and be more cautious.
The October jobs report was surprisingly solid. 204,000 jobs added to payrolls last month, even with the government shutdown. And while traders will likely whoop it up, the rest of us might keep the champagne corked. The problem, 97,000 of those jobs were for hourly workers in retail stores and hospitality services. And while home prices are still gaining, that steady rise has slowed as mortgage rates tick higher. The average 30-year loan carries a rate of 4.35%, the highest it's been in nearly 2 months, and may be enough to give some potential homebuyers pause. For what could be a tough holiday season, there is some good news in there. With stocks at all-time highs, your 401k is doing better than ever. Fidelity says the average account balance is at a record $84,300.
Well, whether the Dow manages to sustain levels above 16,000, only time will tell. But one man who's not so sure about this rally is, of course, the billionaire bearish investor Jim Rogers. Take a listen to what he had to say to Richard Quest.
The fundamentals aren't there. The only thing that's going on is the major central banks in the world are all printing money at a staggering rate. The Japanese said we'll print unlimited amounts of money. So Bernanke said, well, I'll throw in $1 trillion a year. The Europeans said, we'll do whatever's necessary. This is insane.
Well, you say the fundamentals, but you have got growth of 2.5%, 2.8% in the US. You have got falling unemployment, and you did have an S&P 500 average 73% beat expectations. So I'm not saying that there's not reasons.
And the reason that it's going on is because there's an artificial sea of liquidity which is flooding the world. And when the artificial sea of liquidity dries up, what's going to happen, Richard? The market's going to go to 18,000, 19,000, please.
But that artificial flood of liquidity, that abnormal situation, there was no choice. The alternatives were less palatable than doing that which they're doing.
Balderdash, what's wrong with you? What do you mean that? What they should have done is let the system clean itself out, let it collapse. We did what the Japanese did in 1990. We said nobody can fail. 2 decades later, the Japanese had 2 lost decades. We are going to have a lost decade, too, because you keep propping up failure, kicking the can down the road. In the end, you're worse off.
So what's your biggest concern? Because clearly the Fed's going to continue pumping $85 billion a month. The tapering's not going to happen until first quarter of next year.
It's not going to happen then. You think Janet Yellen's going to come in and the first thing she's going to do is, OK, guys, we're going to cut back?
Well, she's going to have to cut back eventually, by her own admission. It can't last forever. She said it.
I know it cannot, but you know what's going to happen? Every time they cut back and the market collapses, they're going to start printing again because they're bureaucrats. They don't know what they're doing. They're terrified when the market goes down, and they're going to keep printing, Richard, until the market says, we're not going to take your garbage paper anymore, and the market's going to force them to quit, and then we're all going to have a very serious problem.
Well, that was Jim Rogers talking to our very own Richard Quest, and this is how US futures stand right at the moment, as you can see. Again, starts on a bit of a downbeat note, really, with the exception of the Dow Jones Industrial Average Futures. But remember, we're around about 4 hours or so away from the opening bell, so anything can happen between now and then. We do have economic data coming out of the United States, key manufacturing data later on in the week for Europe. And remember that Europe is a key market for some of those US companies. Now, police are hunting for a man who opened fire in the lobby of the French newspaper Libération. A 27-year-old photographer was shot twice in the back on Monday, and he's now in intensive care. Police have released footage of a suspect who is also believed to have opened fire outside Société Générale's towers in Paris and also hijacked a car. Our Jim Bitterman is live in the French capital with more for us this hour. What do we know that we didn't know this time yesterday, Jim?
Well, actually, a pretty good deal. We've gotten a lot of photographic and image-making evidence here. In fact, a number of surveillance cameras have spotted this gentleman, and for example, there was a shot of him getting on a commuter train just moments after he was let off after that carjacking. He demanded the driver take him to the Champs-Élysées right behind me here. He got out just a few hundred yards back there and walked to a commuter train station, and that's where they had a photograph of him waiting for a train very calmly leaving the area. However, police have had a lot of information from witnesses, from people that they put out an appeal yesterday, and they said, please, anyone with any kind of information. They've gotten hundreds of phone calls and some pretty good images of this gunman. So I think that it's just a matter of time before they catch him. President Hollande got involved himself yesterday. He said that we can't have that kind of a person walking around armed and dangerous on the streets of Paris, and he ordered his interior minister to do the maximum to catch this guy. Here's what the interior minister had to say.
As long as this person is still on the loose and we do not know the motives, this represents a threat. And this protection, asked for by media outlets, is proving to be vital.
And in fact, there is protection around media outlets here again today. And as the police continue this manhunt, they have gotten a couple of clues. Apparently, they're doing some DNA research. That they're not confirming exactly how they got the gunman's DNA, but it's suspected that it was either from the carjacking, the car it was used in the carjacking, or from the cartridges that were used in the various shooting incidents around town.
Jim, we may be a bit closer to knowing exactly what he looks like, perhaps tracing his movements before that shooting took place and perhaps after. But we don't really know much about his motives, do we?
Not really, although President Hollande kind of filled in some of the gaps in that way yesterday, because he said that this is an attack on the free press. Basically, since there was an attempted shooting at the television network BFM on Friday, and then the actual shooting yesterday at Libération, it's being assumed, and at least by the presidency here, that this was some kind of an attack on the media. So it may be someone that has some kind of issues with the media. I should say as well that this gentleman told the driver of the car that he carjacked that in fact he had served prison time and that he was very determined, and he showed the driver a grenade as well as the shotgun. Nina?
All right, Jim Bitterman there joining us live from the Champs-Élysées in Paris with the latest on that gunman who struck a number of offices over there in Paris, shooting a 27-year-old photographer at the offices of the French newspaper Libération in the chest. Now, let's talk about company news and also the internet, because the companies behind two of the world's biggest search engines are joining forces in an effort to try and rid the internet of child pornography. Google and Microsoft are using new technology to try and scrub the web of photos and videos showing child sex abuse. Microsoft's picture detection system marks illegal content and immediately removes it from the web, at least all copies from the internet. That's the plan. Google's algorithm cleans up results for over 100,000 web queries and also places warnings on others as well for people who might accidentally stumble over those. Well, the company's executive chairman, Eric Schmidt, says that the effort will soon expand to searches in more than 150 languages. Here's what Schmidt had to say. He added, quote, "While society will never wholly eliminate such depravity, we should do everything in our power to protect children from harm." The British Prime Minister, David Cameron, says that it's a positive first step in a global campaign.
It's work in progress, and there's still more to be done, because, you know, I won't be happy until we've taken every child abuse image off the internet, until all parents get the real choice of filters to protect their children from pornography. So there's more work to be done, but we really should be clear today that what we were previously told couldn't and shouldn't be done in terms of cleaning up searches for these vile terms, it will be done. It is being done. 100,000 terms in 159 countries, not just here in the UK.
The search restrictions will launch first here in the United Kingdom and hopefully be rolled out elsewhere around the world. Well, still to come, much of the Philippines' relief effort is being directed from an American warship. Just ahead, we climb aboard the USS George Washington.
New perspectives, new ideas, new voices. QF Radio. Find your frequency.
Which country offers a 30-year tax exemption on tourism development? The answer is Colombia.
UN News Center, tonight on CNN.
Welcome back. Deadly storms hit Sardinia in Italy on Monday, leaving severe flooding and 9 people dead. Our meteorologist Ivan Cabrera joins us now live with more from the CNN Weather Center. Hi there, Ivan.
Yeah, and that death toll apparently ticking up. Those numbers being revised as we speak, unfortunately, as a result of just a very heavy rain moving it through. Look at this storm system here in the western Mediterranean. It just what a remarkable spin of weather here. And there you see the cirrus clouds going all the way to the north, but it's the thunderstorm activity that rolled through. See these bands kind of smacking into Sardinia? That is what created the problem yesterday. Look at the radar perspective. Now, we do cut off here. The radar beam doesn't go out that far, but you can get an idea of just how heavy the precip is across the region here. And we're just getting new pictures from Sardinia so you can appreciate the scope of what we're talking about here. Upwards of 200 millimeters of water. Look at that, just falling in just a matter of hours. Overwhelming rivers, streams, and those got involved. They overflowed their banks, and so we got a lot of people into a lot of trouble. And there you see the lightning as well. So these were severe thunderstorms with some impressive wind that came in as well, that not only affected Sardinia but also Corsica as well. 114 km/h winds in Corsica, and the problem is this storm is not moving. Okay, so we're going to continue to see severe weather pretty much in the same area. Sardinia is still in on it. Now, it will eventually move to the east and then to the north and east. But for today, I think we're still under the gun for heavy rain, frequent lightning, and the potential here even for some spinning thunderstorms, that is, tornadoes right on the western flank here. So we'll watch that closely. To the north, it's cold air spilling in. We have more of that on the way. And as it merges with some moisture here, we're going to be talking about some snow that's going to be flying across Central Europe over the next few days, mainly for the higher elevation, but some areas as well picking up a little bit of snow. But the severe weather continues down to the south. We'll continue to follow that story there in Sardinia for you there. Nina?
All right, Ivan Cabrera, thanks so much for that there, Ivan Cabrera, with the latest news there. As we were saying before, those storms leaving 9 people dead, unfortunately, on the Italian island of Sardinia. Now, the Reuters news agency says that reconstruction costs in the Philippines could cost as much as $5.8 billion. It says the Philippine economic planning chief actually came up with that particular figure. Could rise from here on, who knows. Meanwhile, the death toll from Super Typhoon Haiyan is also climbing. 3,982 deaths have been confirmed so far, and the World Food Programme has also been trying to ramp up its deliveries to the hard-hit areas, especially Tacloban, as authorities say that 4 million people have been left homeless. We're also seeing row after row of blue tents popping up there, forming a tent city, if you like. Authorities say that permanent shelters will now take months to build from here. Aid efforts got a major lift when an American aircraft carrier arrived in the region last week. USS George Washington is being replaced tomorrow by smaller ships that can get a little bit closer to the storm-ravaged areas, but not before Anna Corrin got a rare look at the operations on board.
Cruising several nautical miles off the coast of Guyane, a symbol of America's commitment to one of its oldest friends in need of help. This is the USS George Washington, a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier that's now become a hub for the biggest humanitarian operation ever staged in the Philippines.
I'll make room for the D2 now. Put 3 rhinos here.
In the flight deck control room, Lieutenant Commander Ivan Borja is coordinating aircraft that are making aid drops.
Each helicopter will probably make about 6 drops per day. So with 15, 16 aircraft, times 4, 6, so it adds up.
While up on the flag bridge, Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery watches his aircraft carrier operate with military precision. He's in command of this mini-city and its 5,500 crew, along with 9 other ships that are here to assist.
It is a core mission in the Navy, and you'll find the crew, I think, is really passionate about the job they're getting to do here. And a good percentage of our crew, almost 10%, are Filipino Americans, so there's a lot of belief and heartfelt support for this mission on board.
Historically, the US has had a powerful role in the region since World War II. But with China's economic and military growth, it's had to reassure its dedication to its allies.
If there was
was ever any question about America's commitment to the Asia-Pacific region, well, here is your answer. The sheer air power, number of personnel and depth of resources have certainly helped transform this relief operation. And it's fair to say without the USS George Washington, many Filipinos would still be suffering. As the fighter jets sit vacant on the 4.5-acre flight deck, Ospreys and Seahawks work overtime, making urgent deliveries to some of the most remote and hard-hit areas. Including this one we've been invited to board. We're about to leave the USS George Washington aboard this Seahawk, and it's heading to northern Cebu to make an aid drop. These boxes behind me are filled with goods from USAID. Now, these guys make at least half a dozen drops a day. They work from sunrise to sunset. At the moment, we're racing against time to make the final delivery. We fly over the vast blue sea before hitting the coast. Apocalyptic scenes beneath us. The crew is redirected to a small island that's been virtually wiped out. As they unload supplies, the survivors of Typhoon Haiyan emerge. With nothing left, they still manage to smile.
It's amazing. This is why we all joined, to be a part of something like this so that we can help people. And most of the time we get to do stuff that's pretty cool, but this is something we really feel blessed to do this, to help.
For however long it takes to rebuild, America says it's here for the long haul. Anna Corin, CNN, off the coast of Guiuan, the Philippines.
If you'd like to know what you can do to help those who've been affected by Typhoon Haiyan, you can log on to our Impact Your World website. There you'll find links to vetted charities and aid groups working to help those affected by the storm. That's cnn.com/impact. Now, coming up next on World Business Day, the latest incarnation of a British motoring classic. We'll take a look at the new look Mini.
Which country provides 55% of the world's emeralds? The answer is Colombia.
FaceTime on Marketplace Europe in association with Germany Trade and Invest.
We probably went largely on instinct. You're supposed to do market research and things like that and have a business model in mind, and we had neither of those things. We didn't know how we'd make money from the idea, and we were just going on instinct that other people would like this. The ideal interface is one in which you have the minimum on there, so you have the least distraction to achieve your goal.
FaceTime on Marketplace Europe in association with Germany Trade and Invest.
Which country is strategically placed to service the world's shipping in the Caribbean? The answer is Colombia.
And welcome back. BMW is taking the wraps off what's been billed as a bigger, faster and better connected version of the Mini hatchback. BMW is making a huge investment at 3 UK manufacturing sites to try and support this new model. The Mini is one of the most iconic brands in motoring history, isn't it? The first model came out in 1959 and production continued until the year 2000. The brand was actually revived the following year by BMW and proved a popular hit among motorists. The new model is part of a $1.2 billion investment that BMW is making in the United Kingdom. CNN's Jim Bolden was at the launch.
3 new hatchback models, but still a Mini.
The new Mini hatch is the next chapter in 54 years of Mini tradition.
The new Mini hatchbacks also continue a tradition by its BMW owners. It keeps getting just a little bit bigger.
This was really our key focus, to make sure that the interior volume on this design is at the point where you can say this is a real 4-person car. That you have this 30mm longer wheelbase really gives you that knee space in the back.
Some of the technology improvements are already available in bigger luxury models, but Mini is said to be ahead of the other small car makers when it comes to the infotainment offerings around the steering wheel.
Mini Connected was already there, but they've just updated it. They've given it a new controller, and critically, one of the most important things they've done is they've added support for Android smartphones.
The press of the world paid tribute to the Morris Mini Minor.
BMW acquired the Mini Mark in 1994 and rebuilt it from the ground up, relaunching the brand in 2001. Since then, BMW has produced more than 2.4 million Minis, nearly 1.9 million exported. The United States is the biggest market. And 14% of all cars made in the United Kingdom in 2012 were Minis. And BMW says 1 in 6 of the autos it makes are Minis. Mini brought out the quintessential British bulldog to show just how British the car is, but in fact, it's also manufactured in Austria, and starting next year, Minis will also be manufactured in the Netherlands, designed in the UK, if not all made here anymore.
Well, that's a company making the best use of its manufacturing, but, you know, BMW have invested £500 million in this plant alone. That is a huge sign of confidence in the United Kingdom.
Britain now has to rely on non-British players to invest in its auto factories, including BMW. But its economy is growing faster this year than originally estimated. And resurgent car production is playing its part. Mini sales hit a record for the first 10 months of this year. Jim Bolden, CNN, Oxford, England.
Here's another interesting word for you here, the selfie. It's Oxford Dictionary's word of the year. The now common term for a self-portrait beat the likes of twerk, you remember Miley Cyrus's dance move, and also binge watch to plough through episode after episode of a TV show in one sitting. Now, we thought we'd put this word of the year, the selfie, to good use. Here's a selfie of myself and Issa Suarez that she took earlier on this morning. As you can see, the two of us getting ready to present World Business Today. And speaking of which, you can follow Issa at Issa CNN, myself at Santos CNN, and get in touch with the whole of the World Business Today team at CNN WBT. If you want the official definition of a selfie, though, here, let me bring it to you. It is, according to the Oxford Dictionary, a photograph that is taken of oneself, typically with a smartphone, a webcam, and uploaded onto a social media website. But of course, it's got to be taken like this, doesn't it, with one hand. There you go. Now, before the end of the show, let's have a look at how the European markets are doing. I'm afraid to say it hasn't really improved all that much. Remember, we're still awaiting the ZEW key index of investor sentiment coming out of Germany, which is the Eurozone's biggest economy. That'll be coming out momentarily. That could perhaps move the markets, but for the moment, it seems as though we're getting off to a second downbeat day here in Europe. Well, that's it for this early edition of World Business Today. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Nina Dos Santos in London. WBT will be back in 4 hours' time with the opening bell on Wall Street. But in the meantime, CNN Newsroom is next.
Which country is the 4th largest in South America, yet contains the world's 3rd largest supply of water? The answer is Colombia.
Welcome to Mazda City, the city of growth, the city of possibilities. A free zone located in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, that welcomes companies large and small, bringing together a diverse range of tenants and professionals. A unique business climate, a place for research and partnership, offering competitive business advantage. Join us and the other companies who've chosen Mazda City to be the home of their business. We are Mazda City, the city of possibilities.
CNN Heroes honors people who don't ask for honors. They just want to change the world. Now you can vote for the CNN Hero of the Year. Go to cnnheroes.com. Vote once a day, every day, and honor these amazing people. Vote today.
If you look behind me, I don't know if you can see it, the staircase behind me is now basically a waterfall.
11 members in the family did not survive.
All of this damage was done in just a matter of hours.
Get international help to come here now. This is worse than hell.
The water reached the second story.
I am the only survivor of the family.
Everything has been flattened.
Mama!
Where will you sleep tonight?
A massive job ahead to simply reclaim normality from this kind of devastation.
What is your most